Welcome to JustWannaQuilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. So today we talked to Sara Trail. She is like a thing. She is amazing. She is the executive director of Social Justice Sewing Academy, which is in its first year and is incredibly ambitious and incredibly cool. They're going to have an exhibit at the Houston International Quilt Festival in November from this work that they're doing there. She's awesome. She's also putting out a call for volunteers and funding and other things for her project, so we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end, and then I'll give you some information if you're interested in being part of that. She is fun. She's awesome. I can't wait for you to hear this interview. Excited. All right. So your project, your thing seems so. You just seem so cool. Hold on. Let me get to my notes. We're going to go for like a half hour. Is that cool with you? We'll see how it goes. Like we're trying
Absolutely.
to do like half hour. Okay. And I don't know if you know anything about this project. Let me just quickly tell you, I'm a law professor. I am doing lots of interviews, like 200 interviews for the podcast to try to understand the whole spectrum of the quilting industry so I can better understand the role of intellectual property within it. So that's kind of the whole big project. Okay. So your stuff looks really interesting, and I'm really, it kind of gets to the heart of what I think copyright and creativity is all about in some way. Like the one spectrum, people don't always like expression, kids, all kinds of stuff. So anyway, I'd love to talk to you about just the process and who you are and your quilting life, and you're so amazing, and all your early amazing kid when you're a kid. And just, we'll just see how it goes. That sound good?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you, we're donating this to the Quilt Alliance, these interviews. So can you tell me your name and where you're calling from?
My name is Sara Trail, and I'm calling from Antioch, California.
Cool. And what's your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life?
My first memory would probably be my grandma. My grandma used to babysit me, and she had one of those antique treadle sewing machines.
Yeah.
So she would let me sit on her lap, and she would push the pedal because I couldn't necessarily reach it, but I could guide the fabric.
That is so cool. That's so cool. And you were like a sewing savant from like a very young age, right? So tell us.
Yes, I was really blessed.
Yeah, you really were. Like you totally were. So tell yeah. So tell us why I say that.
So I've been sewing since I was 4. When I got about 10, I was kind of winning competitions for having really, on point piecing, as traditional quilting may go. I would win, kid competitions. When I turned 12, I was leading a free sewing studio at my church where my pastor bought 10 sewing machines from Walmart, and we would let community members come and learn how to sew. I think I've always loved sewing, so I've always loved teaching sewing, inevitably. But as I got older, when I was 12, I went to a C&T publishing book sale, and I approached the publisher and said, "Hi, I'm Sara, and I want to teach, write a book teaching tweens how to sew."
That's so
I think,
great.
while they laughed at first, I think they were, enthused with my confidence. But once I brought in, my work samples and just repertoire of all the projects I had made, they were like, "Oh, well, absolutely. If you want to do it, go ahead." So they gave me a book deal. That was published when I was 13.
That's amazing.
After that,
right?
I had a fabric line.
Yeah.
No, it was really fun because the book had a really entrepreneurial twist of how instead of, clearly it wasn't sewing for social justice, but it was how you can use sewing as an alternative or even as a supplement to babysitting to market yourself to be, an independent young entrepreneur.
That is
really
so
about
cool.
how sewing can be enabling.
That is so cool.
No,
so let me ask you, what year is that you're doing that? Like when you're doing the book? When is the book?
8th grade, 2008.
2008. So you're right in the midst of like that entrepreneurial, like it's just like we get this weird sort of bump that's starting to happen right at that point. So having an entrepreneurial sewing book for tweens is like totally, right? Like how good, right? So how is that experience of having a book deal at 13?
It actually made me miss a lot of birthday parties, to be quite honest, because they had a lot of deadlines.
Yeah.
And I think the most difficult part about writing the book wasn't about making the project and then writing the instructions, but it was the step outs. So, for example, to make a project, I'd have to make it 20 times in various stages. And I wasn't necessarily understanding that.
Yeah. And did you have help? Like, did your parents help you, or did you have to do it all by yourself?
I had to do it all by myself. My mom's not that great.
You sound like my daughter.
Yeah, her quarter-inch seam looks more like 5/8 in swirls. She's a good hand teacher, though. I appreciate her hand embroidery, but I'm not good at hand embroidery. So my mom compliments the skills, and vice versa.
Totally. And that's the beauty of having daughters, because you are very honest. So then you had DVDs. You had a DVD thing. Tell us about that. So that came off the book?
So the DVD thing it did. The book did well, and people, I think it was because of general audience. Like, they said, oh, I'd like to get this, but maybe my 8-year-old can't, read the whole book. Can you do they wanted a supplemental. So then we did the DVD, which was fun. I think I had 3 or 4 projects. After that, we did 2 fabric collections with fabric quilt that
Amazing.
are 10 to 12 fabrics in each collection.
Wow.
And then after that, we did a simplicity pattern collection, which features jackets and prom dresses and aprons and
You're amazing.
Everything.
So why did you didn't keep doing that? What was, you went a different direction. So what made you decide to go a different direction?
I think college did. College, when I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, and I don't know, I was just awoken to issues on a different level.
Yeah.
Like Trayvon Martin was murdered, and just my socio-political development was stagnant.
Yeah.
Probably in middle school and high school, just because of the safe spaces I was in. I was
and
in
you were so
school,
busy,
in the
right?
suburbs. Exactly. I was so busy.
I
wasn't
so busy.
Necessarily.
Because you weren't the regular high school kid, right?
Design.
You were insane,
exactly.
right?
I was working all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was working and going to New York and designing. And so I just really was just extremely busy. But I became really politicized when I started college, just because I was aware of injustices that weren't in my traditional, high school circles.
Yeah.
I went to a high school where I was one of, maybe 3 African-American kids. But when I got to UC Berkeley, it was really diverse and I loved it. Yeah. But just little things such as being stopped by the police, hey, where are you guys going? Why are they asking us this? It was,
right.
I experienced a lot of more microaggressions. I experienced racial profiling for the first time.
Yeah.
Just a lot of things that I wasn't necessarily as used to in the comfort zone of my private suburban, high school.
Right. So I'm going to ask you a question that's kind of obvious, but because we're doing this for the Quilt Alliance and preserving it, and someone might be listening in 10, 20, 30 years, explain who Trayvon Martin is and why that was such an important moment.
Trayvon Martin was a 16-year-old kid. No, he was 17. Yeah, 16 or 17-year-old who was killed in Florida for wearing a hoodie and walking in his neighborhood by someone who wasn't even on the police force. There was a neighborhood watch patrolman who was just a neighborhood named George Zimmerman, who murdered him. I'm assuming, DNA kind of says they may have gotten in a fight, but he was being followed. George Zimmerman called the police and said, hey, someone's, walking in my neighborhood. What should I do? The police said, leave him alone. George Zimmerman didn't listen to the police instructions, followed him. They may have gotten in a fight or whatever. Maybe Trayvon was I don't know. But the point is, he killed him. And he was born, I think, like 14 days before me. Our birthdays are both,
wow.
We were both born in 95 in February.
That's craziness. So and we talked to Sean Kimber, and she, talked about how she had made these quilts and the practice quilts to make a quilt, and all. She would it was really impactful on her as well. So I'm curious, how did that incident? Why is that incident so? Why did it change sort of your direction or who you are? I mean, I can guess, right? But I'm saying, again, for preservation purposes and for people who may not understand, why was that such a big moment?
Because George Zimmerman wasn't found guilty. So that was, I think, the most deafening, that was the most definitely loud America could ever be, to say Black lives don't matter. In fact, a neighborhood man can kill one without any repercussions.
Yeah. It's huge. It's not good. So what happened to you? So that happened. You feel really connected to him, same age, your experience, you're at Berkeley. So what happens next?
So I kind of shifted the focus of my quilts. Before that, I was making wedding ring quilts and paper piecing and Irish chains. I was quilting for the love of it.
Yeah.
But after that, I became quilting with messages. So it's like, if I'm going to go home on the weekends and sew and I'm going to put hundreds of hours into a quilt, I want my quilt to have a message bigger than I know how to sew 1/4-inch seams.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so you finished, you were at Berkeley. What was your major at Berkeley?
It was political science and public policy, kind of with a focus on education.
Interesting. And then you went to Harvard.
Yeah, I got my master's.
That's so insanely cool. And what did you do at Harvard? What was your focus? It was education, but what did you do? What was your focus of?
It was prevention science and practice, which kind of looks at the systemic factors and like the adolescent psychology of what creates trauma and how we can help trauma-inflicted youth. Because, like, ideally, and especially in it's so much, like, talk to an average under 15-year-old Black kid's trauma, the amount of funerals they've been to of their peers is going to have an impact on their psychological and just their upbringing.
That's really interesting. And so you graduated when?
Last year, so May 2018.
Okay, and because you're shy and don't like go do anything, and I'm just kidding. Because you're like so clever and like do things that people don't normally do. You did what? You started the Social Justice Sewing Academy?
I did. That was really it.
You are amazing. So tell us about that. Is it a year old now? How old is it? It
is. It's literally like 1 year in January. It's not even a year old. It was founded January 20, or it's a year in like a couple months. It was like we got 501c3 status January 2017, but we really didn't get full-time programming until like mid-May.
Because you graduated. Because you had to finish your master's, right?
That was it. I got this 501c3 when I was still in the middle of the master's program, so I didn't really get to dedicate full time until I graduated.
But you already had the idea because you got the 501c3 before you even graduated. So tell us. Did you always have this in mind, or like did it come at grad school? When did you come up with the idea? And tell us a little bit about what the idea is.
It was really after I graduated from Berkeley. So the summer when I was getting ready to go to Harvard, I was doing for my education minor, we had to do 100 hours in like a public school. So the public school that I was in was Berkeley High, which is like a couple blocks away from Cal campus, and I was teaching the kids, and we were doing really culturally relevant and critical pedagogy, meaning we were reading things about race and whiteness and social constructs and mass incarceration, and just reading, just not controversial, but just really, like, I would say just critical. Like we were reading Paulo Freire and just critical, like, readings that weren't the typical, high school type To Kill a Mockingbird. We were reading curriculum really for and tailored to the group of kids that I was working for. So the authors reflected them. They had similar lived experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And, they're saying, oh, what do you do for fun? And I was like, well, what I do for fun is I sew. And so they were like, let me see. And so that time I just finished like a quilt from Trayvon Martin. And they were like, well, I want to make a quilt too. I want to do mine on catcalling. I'm tired of the way, people interact with me when I ride public transportation, how they expect me. And I'm just like, no, I understand that. And then other people wanted to make a quilt on dress codes. And then one of the younger Black guys, he was like, I want to make mine on my experience, being a 6-foot-tall Black guy in Oakland. And I was like, well, I'll see what I can do to bring fabric. But typically sewing is kind of a hobby for the affluent to a degree. Right. To make a quilt costs more than to buy a quilt, and et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of just, due to my connection in the sewing world, I was like, hey, I got fabric, I got extra stuff, so I brought it all there. And the kids had so much fun creating their own social justice art quilts. And so it's like, I was just like, okay, I need to find a way to make sewing a really equitable field where you don't need to come from a certain socioeconomic background to be able to afford the craft of sewing.
That's really great. And so
then I applied. Yeah. So then I applied for a grant. I got a grant from UC Berkeley, and they kind of funded the first summer program. So the summer before I went to Harvard, we did a 6-week summer program at UC Berkeley. UC Berkeley gave us a space, and we had like 20 high school kids that came every day from 11 to 3. And in the morning, we'd do like a homework assignment. They'd have to, do things such as write a poem, write reflexive journal entries. They'd have to read. And then they did a YPAR project, which is youth participatory action research, which is where they surveyed and they did a qualitative research study, interviewing and talking to their peers, and then kind of coding the transcripts and kind of coding what they heard and, I guess recorded the data that they collected, and then writing a research project on what they cared about, which ultimately inspired their end product, which was the social justice art quilt.
That's so incredible.